Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Anthony here with the Retro Gamers Podcast, and conspicuous by his absence this week is my co-host, Larry Moorman. He decided that SummerSlam and the WWE was more important than our Retro Gamers Podcast, which is completely unacceptable, but I think we have a good, suitable replacement here this week. Say hello to one half of the Better Half podcast, and probably the better half, Frank Messina.
Hello, Anthony.
What's up, Frank? How's it going?
I'm all right. I'm okay. Thanks for having me.
No, happy to have you on. It's been forever since we've actually really interacted, I think. So we're overdue.
Yeah, it's usually with Larry as the buffer of the guest host. But first of all, before anything, I want to congratulate you and Larry on your 100th episode. I think you're up to 102 now.
This is 103.
Very monumentous. 103. Okay, so I'm 103. And, so that's great. We at the Better Half, because we record every other week, we're only at 31, but we're catching up. So, but thank you again for having me. I'm honored to fill in for Larry as he's, playing with his wrestling games, and
not
his
so much
belts.
Playing with them as watching it, and yes, running around. Is it Long Island or is it Brooklyn? Is it Brooklyn?
I think it's the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. Yeah.
So he's running around Brooklyn with three belts. I think just
probably
one
around his waist, and one on each shoulder, probably. So,
chick
magnet.
Yes. Well, he's in the right crowd for it.
Well, hey, I hope he finds a wrestling loving girl who's into slightly chubby men. Who, hey, I'm chubby. I'm okay with it.
No, it's all good. You know what? Yeah, and at least then you'll have something to talk about on the Better Half.
Yes. Well, we're going to try and get him back into dating. That's the whole. We're starting to lose the other one half of the Better Half, so we have to get him into dating to keep the podcast going. So, but we're enough talking about that. Let's talk some retro gaming.
No, we're talking video games. And before we start getting into what we're going to discuss tonight, first thing I want to remind everybody is thank you to everyone who entered our NES Classic giveaway contest. We got a good number of entrants. We were really happy about that. And tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern, this is Wednesday, August 22nd, 9 p.m. Eastern, Larry and I will be live on Facebook as we select the lucky winner. Sadly, Frank, it cannot be you.
That's all right. I'm okay.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll survive.
It's like those old radio contests when friends and family of Z100 cannot participate in the contest. So luckily, I never had any friends who did that. So
exactly. But I was actually just really happy that we're giving away an NES Classic. If we were giving away a Virtual Boy, nobody would have entered the contest. So.
Yeah, I don't think one person would have entered the contest, but he was not eligible. Larry.
Exactly. So, and then hashtag VB6. We can get all the Virtual Boy jokes we want this week, which is great.
Yes.
Because Larry can't stop them. And that just makes me happy. But you got to help me out with those.
Okay, I'll think of a few on the fly.
Definitely think of a few. So, and then in terms of what you're seeing on my screen here. Still having some Skype issues because Microsoft has decided that they don't want to do split screen anymore. So I'm in a nice small window in the upper left corner or upper right. I don't remember which one. But Frank, you've got the main stage.
Oh, yay. Oh, wait. So this is going live right now, or we're just recording?
No. We're just recording, but this will go up on YouTube.
Oh, okay, cool. Hey, hi, YouTube.
Exactly.
I forgot you guys have a YouTube channel now, so that's great.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, so I'm on the main stage? Okay, people are seeing my big mug. All right.
People are seeing your big mug and the Ranger stuff in the background. I have the same Stanley Cup banner, just so you know.
Yes. This is my this is Studio B of the Better Half Studio, and so I decided to actually, this was white walls when we first started. I decided to paint it and hang some memorabilia up. I have some signed stuff back over there. And my retro gaming systems are all over there, which I set up everything. I set up my Genesis, my Dreamcast. I just bought a PlayStation. The only thing I need now is a Super Nintendo.
Nice.
So I'm gonna be working on getting that. I got all my Xboxes, my PlayStations all set up, and they're all working. Larry actually came over and helped me. I had a few little hookup issues with the original, with my Genesis, because there was just my new TV does not compatible. So. But everything's hooked up, ready to go, and I was actually going to play some Dreamcast tonight, but I decided to do the podcast instead. So
yeah, well, and I appreciate that. But you were big into Sega growing up, right? I think you were like bigger into Sega than you were Nintendo.
Yeah, I think it was two of my neighbors had Nintendo, and I think Sega was a little bit cheaper, so my parents went that route. Mm-hmm. But it was fun. I loved Sonic, and I loved Alex Kidd and Wonder Boy. I loved all those games. Rocky.
Rocky! I remember that one.
Side by side Rocky. I loved all that, and plus, like I said, two of my closest friends had Nintendo, so it was either at my house playing Sega or I was at their house playing Nintendo. But I was a little jealous of the little robot from was it Metroid? Yeah, little Rob. Was that Metroid?
No. It was Gyromite.
Gyromite, right. Yeah. But I did love Duck Hunt, and I love the Mario games, so that's why I think it's time I'm gonna go find a Super NES and probably a regular NES and SNES. Actually, I know there's that argument.
The NES. And we talked about that last week.
I know, and add to my my collection to the dismay of my wife. But it's all right. It's my basement. So
your basement, your rules.
Yeah. Well, this half. She's got her office on the other side. So
that half. But just to talk about what I thought would be a cool thing to discuss today between the two of us, because I know you're a funny guy. That if you listen to the better half, I can't tell you how many times I crack up in my car while I'm driving.
Go on.
And it could be because the stories you're telling are part of my past too. So I'm just remembering things. Like I was just listening to an episode when you were talking about how I got up at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday or a Sunday and I was rearranging the cabinets and you were sleeping.
It was my for those who don't know, for the Retro Gamers audience, I am a letter carrier by trade. And it was like my first Saturday off. Anthony and I had an apartment together, and I think it was earlier than 9:30, but it was probably maybe about 7:30, 8 o'clock. So it was like my first Saturday off in literally 2 years. There's a cat.
I've got two. I got two of them wandering around. Yeah.
And I wake up to dishes clattering, and my room was closest to the kitchen, and glasses and silverware, and I'm like, what the hell is that? And I come out of the room, disheveled mess, and there's Anthony rearranging the kitchen cabinets, and I'm like, why? And he's like, quote, and I quote, they were bothering me. And I just said, stop and do this at 11 o'clock in the afternoon, and I went back to bed. But I could have killed you that morning, but I didn't. So
you probably could have. No, we survived a good year and change, a little over a year, I think.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun times in that apartment. That was a lot of fun. We played a lot of video games in that apartment, and we also watched. We had our movie routine. Remember, you would watch one of mine, I'd watch one of yours.
Yes, I remember that.
we expanded our movie horizons as well. So.
I also introduced you to the wonder that was 24. Remember season 1?
Okay, so real quick.
I know this isn't video game related, but
no, but we'll get past this real quick. Season 2 was already starting. I believe season 2 was already. Yes. I was watching season 2, and we'd watch an episode of season 2, and then afterwards we would watch 2 episodes of season 1, which you had on DVD, yep. But I had not seen. So I'm watching season 2, and then we'd watch season 1, and then obviously, spoiler alert, about 12, 13 episodes into season 1, we find out that what was the girlfriend's name?
Nina Myers. Nina Myers. And it was like episode 20. It was all the way at the end.
Oh, what?
Or 22.
So, okay, it was closer to the end. It was, we find out that, Nina is the bad, the villain. And Anthony, who knew this and knew it was coming up, was biting his tongue the whole time. And then when I found out, I literally, like Marge Simpson did in the plane in this Simpsons episode, ran back and forth through the apartment going, no! No, I was losing my mind because to me that was like the ultimate betrayal, and then I was hooked for the next 8 seasons of 24. So
yes,
but good times. Yeah. You were laughing.
They were good. Oh my god, it was just such a great moment. If I had a cell phone back then, since this was pre-cell phone for me, I would have recorded it.
It was pre-smartphone days.
Pre-smartphone for sure. Yeah, no question.
I had a.
but then also, and we've referenced this one on our show before too, to get to video games. But the Baldur's Gate moment is very infamous on our show. So
it was Baldur's Gate is still a very sensitive subject that I my lawyers will not let me talk about. Once the trial is over. So I'm still angry at them and that company and the GameCube for that matter.
And the GameCube. Well, that's okay. A lot of people didn't like the GameCube. That's why it didn't do so well. So
I had some decent games, but it wasn't. I don't want to talk about Baldur's Gate. So
yeah, no, it's really tough. Even though I still own it, but I do. They were good salesmen. I thought it was a great game. It just didn't have an ending. That's all.
Yeah, no end.
But I thought what a good topic for us today, since Larry is away, and something fun I thought that we can do. And as I was doing the research on it, I realized this is actually a bigger thing than just one segment. So we're probably going to break some of this up, and I know Larry's going to want to get involved in this maybe next week. But I thought we would start looking at some retro video game ads. So we talk about the games that we buy and we play and all that stuff, but we haven't really touched on the commercials that sold them to us, because back in the 80s and 90s, the internet wasn't really a thing. You weren't advertising on it. So the way that you found out anything about your games was either through a print ad or a radio ad or an actual commercial. So I thought it would be an interesting thing to walk down memory lane and just see exactly how these companies tried to sell their systems or their games, starting with the very first one, which was the Magnavox Odyssey way back in 1972. Magnavox.
I remember that.
Magnavox is the first one to go commercial with an actual video game system. So I think what we're going to do now, for at least for this segment, is we're going to play the commercial for you guys, and then Frank and I are going to talk about it, or probably more importantly, make fun of it. So Let's take a look at the Magnavox Odyssey.
Magnavox presents Odyssey, the electronic game of the future. Odyssey easily attaches to any brand TV, black and white or color, to create a closed-circuit electronic playground. Odyssey gives you all the exciting action of hockey and 11 other challenging play and learning games for the entire family. Odyssey, a new dimension for your television. Now at your Magnavox dealer. He's listed in the yellow pages.
It looks like you just snap it onto the front of your television, and I love the commercial. It's got fits any brand from 18-inch to 25-inch. Wow.
25 inches was a big deal back then.
Right. And it looks usually white shadow boxes controlling it, and you just basically put the background of the game. Mm-hmm. You basically put the game board onto the television, and you just move these white square boxes. And I don't know if we had somebody I know had an Odyssey. We didn't. It was probably my neighbors across the street who had the Odyssey. But that is some basic stuff. It's basically not even I don't even know how to describe it. It's not really a game. It's just like an attachment to your television.
Yeah, basically. I mean, it's just like it's lights moving on your television, and you're putting the game, basically the sheet, on top of it to make it seem like it's a game.
But like a trace.
What I love about this commercial specifically is when it's like, first off, kudos to whoever was playing the recorder. It must have been like Magnavox's CEO's like 7-year-old. There's just this recorder playing in the background, and I'm like, oh, that's just painful.
It is pretty painful.
But then, when they were doing the quick hits for the games, where they're like, oh, it's fun for the whole family, and you have like skiing and hockey, and then roulette.
The roulette for the whole family. Yeah, that's for Grandpa.
Roulette. Yeah, exactly. That's for Grandpa when he's like sitting in his recliner with his friggin' cigar and beer and just.
Yeah, I just love, like, first of all, the controllers are these two. They almost look like. It looks like a viewfinder that you would hold up to your face.
Yes.
And the two knobs on the side, and it's so basic. What year did Odyssey come out? I don't even remember. 1973. This commercial's from. So
I think it was I think it was like 1972 or 71 even. It may have come out before this commercial.
Finally, before I was before I was born.
Yes.
Which is nice.
Right. It's a good feeling. The rest of it, I can't help you with. I think everything else is after you were born, or right around the year I was born. So,
yeah, I'm looking at the first comment on YouTube, and it says, "Imagine trying to port GTA 5 to this." I just don't see this.
Oh, somebody should try. But can you imagine, like, you have like the clear plastic sheet up on your TV of a map?
Oh yeah, right, exactly.
It's just your light going through the streets.
It's funny. I'm reading another one, and this is actually very interesting. It says this game the system has no sound, no color graphics, and no processor. It displayed basic squares, and cartridges had no ROM or other memory, just the board with the circuits. It's actually, if you really think about it, I mean, it was only a few years earlier they put a man on the moon, and then we got Odyssey, which is, I don't know if that's a step backwards but think about what our phones now. I'm not talking to you. You're in California through my phone, so that's just pretty amazing. But Odyssey was definitely an Odyssey. I think a very big precursor to Pong. So, because they actually got what Odyssey's basic game functions onto the actual screen itself instead of clipping something onto your screen.
Right, and Pong,
which I thought
and when Pong was released, it was actually just its own like system. Like,
right.
You just bought Pong. You didn't get anything else. It was just going to be Pong.
Pong was my family's first system.
Nice.
So, yeah. Then we went to Atari 2600.
Yeah, mine was a little later with the Atari 2600 also. But before the Atari 2600 hit the market, there was another commercial I wanted to hit up, which was the Coleco Telstar, which predated. What?
I didn't know about this one. I had a look. I know the Coleco Vision.
Yes. But
the Telstar I did not know about.
Yeah, the Telstar didn't have a very long shelf life. So let's just take a look at that commercial, and then we'll talk about that one.
You're watching the most exciting game you will ever see on your TV set. Telstar by Coleco, with 3 different games. Telstar Tennis, with digital scoring, variable speeds. Telstar Hockey. Each player controls a goalie plus a forward on the other side. Oops, a goal. And Telstar Singles Handball, a game you play yourself. Telstar Handball, Tennis, Hockey, all 3 at an exciting low price. For great family fun, hitch your TV to a Telstar by Coleco.
What I love about the Telstar is the fact that you were buying 3 versions of the same game. Ultimately, that's all it really had.
Pretty much. They offered handball, tennis, and hockey, and basically, it was just black background with white rectangles moving up and down, and a ball that's going back and forth. But the switches were manual on the thing. Like I said, on the console. The funny thing that got to me was originally the opening line of the commercial was, "This is the most exciting game in the world." I'm like, maybe in 1975. Like, that, for me, that's minutes and minutes of fun. But there was 3 levels. It was easy, intermediate, and expert. So or beginner, easy. So all I see is your cat jumping from couch to the chair, and I'm laughing.
she just runs. Yeah, she goes wherever the hell she wants. But
I don't know that cat's name. That's a newer cat?
That is Snowbell.
Snowbell. Okay, hi Snowbell.
Yeah, I didn't name her. That was her name. That was her name when I got her, and I kept it. Then eventually you'll see Link wandering around somewhere. But
all right, well, that's a good name. I get that reference.
Exactly. But what I like about these early commercials is the fact that they have to tell you, like, that this is a great thing and that this is awesome, and they really have to explain it, because people don't know what video games are, at least outside of the arcade. Everybody would go to an arcade at best at this point, but they didn't know anything about bringing it home. So it's like you literally had 30 seconds to convince somebody. It's like, hey, this is an awesome thing, and you need to buy it, and here's why. You know.
My question to you, I know this was new for home, but were there, like, I mean, when did arcades actually, like, become famous? I know it was in the 70s, but I thought it was more in the later 70s where you would actually have, like, arcades that had, like, Space Invaders and Asteroids and those games. Because these seem like, I don't remember ever hearing about, the giant, well, no, just going to an actual arcade and playing a video game. But like my giant Arkanoid game that I have over here, what I can't think of the terminology, but sorry, with the hand.
The cabinet.
The cabinet, right? Yeah. Like, that wasn't popular until the mid '70s. So the fact that they were introducing these into the home, people did not have any idea what these consoles, I guess you want to call it a console, could actually do. It was new, and if you notice in the two commercials, it was all family.
Yes.
It wasn't just for kids. It was, let's get the whole family around the TV. And in the age of when television was actually gaining its popularity from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, it was like the whole boob tube and the frozen dinners, the Hungry Man dinners. Everyone ate and did everything in front of the television.
Yep.
So I thought that was pretty interesting. That's the one thing, if to see how they changed throughout the year. So far, the first two we've seen included all the family members.
Exactly,
so,
and that's and that starts to change when you get over to the Atari 2600. At least with a couple of them, you're going to start seeing that they start to gear them towards kids, or they don't even focus on the families anymore. They just focus on the games, like when they're trying to sell the actual games. So let's move on to Atari 2600 and take a look at what they have to offer.
Okay, Atari, let's see your best pitch.
You're out, Rose!
The Atari video computer system is 20 cartridges with 1,300 game variations you play on your own TV set.
You can't keep me in here, Atari.
Don't tonight. Play it.
Don Knotts needed a paycheck. Had to do that Atari 2600 commercial. And he wasn't even really the main star of it. Pete Rose, kind of had top billing in that one, and he was in color. Steve, did you know?
Yes, I did notice
Don
that.
Knotts was in black and white. That's funny. I wonder if they did that on purpose because people remembered him from Mayberry.
Well, yeah,
and that was in black and white.
Andy Griffith was black and white. So
right, I wonder if they did that. There was a reasoning behind that. So
yeah, you're probably right. But what's interesting about this commercial is this is one of the first ones that I found where they bring in celebrities to sell the actual system. So it's like, hey, yeah, exactly. Like Pete Rose before the gambling, exactly, the gambling thing, and then Don Knotts, like you said, for the Mayberry thing. But now they were starting to get a little more creative with it. It's not just, hey, here's the system and here's what it does, so you should really buy it and it's fun for the whole family. It's like, no, it's like, check this out. Pete Rose thinks it's cool. Don Knotts thinks it's cool.
Well, like you just said, getting away from the whole family, they really didn't show. There was no family in that video, in that commercial, and it was basically they showed the system, they showed a whole display of games, saying how 20 games plus 1,300 variations of the games, which basically is like, in their eyes, that's like medium level, intermediate, hard, beginner. That counts as a variation. So it's interesting to see the evolution of these commercials when it comes especially to the family. So it's gonna be. I know some of I looked at some of these earlier, so I got a kick out of them, but they're pretty funny.
And speaking of getting the kick out of them, we're gonna go into let's go into we'll go back to the family a little bit, but this is the game that basically was blamed for the video game crash of the 80s. It's the much reviled, based on a very successful major film, E.T.
Hello? Somebody out there? E.T. Video game?
It's coming soon, only from Atari. The video game that lets your family help E.T. get home. But only if you have an Atari video game system at home.
So E.T., which was, we've talked about it before on the podcast, but it was a game that was literally made in 5 weeks so that they can hit the Christmas rush in December. I want to say, is it 83 that E.T. came out? I think it was 83.
I believe.
Yeah, like
80. Well, it came out Christmas of 82, I think.
Oh, 82.
So the commercial's from 82. So the commercial's from 82 and it came out at Christmas.
Yeah.
It's probably Christmas of 82.
Yeah, so they were trying to get this one out there to sell, because they figured everybody's going to go see E.T. They're going to want the game. And they actually they made more E.T. games than there were systems that were on the market.
Thinking that people were going to go buy the system.
Yeah.
Which honestly is not illogical because I bought my my PlayStation 2 after seeing Grand Theft Auto.
There you go.
So I'm like, I have to have this game. And so I went out and bought it. Actually lucked out because it was actually the weekend I think I met you guys. Was at that Super Bowl party. I won.
Oh, that's right.
The pool. I won the boxes, and I went out with my money and bought a PlayStation 2 and Grand Theft Auto 3. I think it was at the time. So
that was money well spent.
Not the worst strategy, but in this case, when you only given 5 weeks to make a game, that's going to bite you.
But what I like about the commercial is, if I'm not mistaken, the little kid that's in this commercial is it Andre Gower, I think, from the Monster Squad?
Oh, yes, it is. You are 100% spot on. Absolutely. Yeah, that's what he's right.
Exactly. Because when I first looked at the commercial, I'm like, that looks like Sean Astin. I go, no, it's not Sean Astin. It's the other guy I always confuse him with.
Yes, absolutely. You nailed it. Absolutely.
Andre Gower, Monster Squad. Yeah, see, everybody had humble beginnings. And speaking of humble beginnings, let's get to the next one, which is Pitfall.
Yes.
And you'll see another familiar face.
I'm looking forward to this one.
Just last night, I was lost in the jungle with Pitfall Harry, surrounded by giant scorpions and man-eating crocodiles.
Well, Harry and I just grabbed the van, swung through the trees, and over the tar pits and found the jungle treasure. It was really neat.
If you haven't met Pitfall Harry, you're missing the year's most incredible video game adventure. Pitfall for the Atari 2600 and in television.
Since I met Pitfall Harry, no other man will do.
Pitfall, designed by David Crane for Activision.
So, she was like, I think maybe she was a friend in Punky Brewster or something. She just looks like she was a character actor. That girl at the end.
I don't know. Like I know I've seen her on something. She was definitely on something. But of course, the kid we're really talking about in this commercial is none other than Jack Black. Jack Black. Yep, getting his.
Jack Black started in Pitfall, ended in Jumanji.
You know what? That's the way it works in the industry. It comes around.
But I don't hate Jack Black. There's sometimes I can't stand him, but that was that's a very young Jack Black. Or someone says, is that young Jack Black or young Sigourney Weaver? Oh, God.
Actually, at this point, I think Sigourney Weaver was already doing Ghostbusters.
She was definitely doing. She was definitely doing.
Definitely a Ghostbusters. All right, so we've looked at a few commercials where they were just basically telling you what the system was, right? Okay, then we looked at some commercials where they started to bring in some actors and just focusing on the games. Now we're going to get into what I feel is like my favorite part of these, the musical numbers, the musical commercials.
Right.
So we're going to take a look at a commercial for the Commodore 64, which I know was one of your favorites, Frank.
I was a huge fan of Commodore 64. I loved Commodore 64. We literally went from Atari to the Commodore VIC-20 to the 64, and then Sega. My family came in a little bit late because we were still doing the whole Commodore 64 thing when the the original Sega Master System came out and the original Nintendo came out. We were like, I guess, just holding on. But I don't remember. I think I got the Sega Master System for a birthday present or a Christmas present, and then the Commodore 64 just got pushed back like every other toy in the closet gets pushed back by the wayside. So, but I had thousands upon thousands of games, and I was actually just listening to an episode. I think it was episode 60 or 61 of the Retro Gamers. When you were unboxing your Commodore 64 and all the discs with the missing labels, and I was laughing so hard because I'm like, I know that game.
Yeah, and I still one of the things I said I was going to do one day was I was actually going to go live on Facebook and figure out what games are on those discs that are not labeled. So that's something I got to do in the future.
There were so many games you could play on that system, and I just remember some off the top of my head was Raid on Moscow, Raid on Bugly Bay, Beachhead, G.I. Joe. Yes. I remember the G.I. Joe was fantastic. I believe there was Jeopardy was another one on there that I used to love. But I remember I used to, and I know you did too, because they only had a limited amount of questions. You start to memorize the questions the more you played. There was a Wheel of Fortune, obviously. But there was one game I used to love called Space Taxi.
Yes.
And Jump we used to play all the time. So
Space Taxi was awesome, and there was I had another game in my head that just that system was the first system where I actually played a Marvel themed game on it. It was a text adventure game for the Incredible Hulk.
Oh, I loved those text.
Yes.
Go north. Open the door. This door cannot open. Use key. Unlock door. You're on a cliff. Back up. It's like don't fall.
Exactly.
I love those text.
I love those games too, and and of course they've morphed since then, text-based adventure games to now point-and-click games. But yeah, those games are awesome. So let's take a look at this Commodore 64 commercial where they actually started using music, like actual songs, like original pieces, to sell games.
I'm more alive than ever before. I've been to my Commodore 64. My friends are knocking down my door to get into my Commodore 64.
It's mind-boggling. Commodore 64 lets you play hundreds more games than any video machine, plus draw, program, even do music.
I'm more alive than ever before, and my friends are knocking down my door. 'Cause now we're into so much more. We're into our Commodore 64.
This is great. I'm sorry.
You're gonna get that. You're gonna get it stuck in your head.
No. With this comment, I had no friends when I was growing up, and I got this for Christmas one year. I set it up in my bedroom and stared at my door in anticipation. I was very disappointed and demanded that my parents return it when no one knocked down my door. Come on. I mean, that writes itself. The game was fantastic. Now they're using their own music, and again, no family, just the kid and his friends.
Kids. Exactly. Now it's starting to come out that like video games are for kids. Kids are gonna make their parents buy it for them anyway. Mm-hmm. So it's like, why appeal to the parents? There were a couple of Apple II commercials that I was gonna show, but I decided not to because one, they were starring Dick Cavett, and I'm sure a lot of people don't know who Dick Cavett is now. But
I barely Dick Cavett.
I know exactly. So, but the funny thing about the commercial was one of them was he was interviewing a housewife, and she was basically talking about how her house duties are so much easier now that she's got this brand new Apple II.
Right. How does that help you?
Because she can do her finances on there, and she can, make a list of chores and stuff. I was like, wow, okay. Paper and pen, much cheaper.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're going to continue on the musical side of things now, because Nintendo, of course, became a powerhouse in the 80s with the Nintendo Entertainment System, or also known as the NES. Larry, you're not here. It's called the NES this week. Sorry.
I gotta kind of agree with Larry on this one. I've never heard. I've always heard it called NES, but I mean, hey, I'm just a guest, so it's the NES.
No, it's fine. I've always called it an NES. I've never called it NES, but it is interesting when you look at it because they don't put periods after the letters. So it's
true.
But
each letter does stand for the Nintendo Entertainment System. But my biggest beef with Larry is the way he pronounces Sega. And I've actually had Sega.
Sega.
I know it has an E, but if you listen to the commercials, it's Sega. It's Sega.
It's Sega.
It's not Sega.
No. I agree with you 100%. He's wrong on that one.
All right, good. Then we're good.
Yeah, no, we're totally good. We're gonna carry on, and we're gonna look at some Nintendo commercials now, since they were pretty much the big deal in the late '80s. Before Sega started coming out. Well, the Master System was out at the same time, but it didn't kind of have the following that Nintendo did. And one of the most important games on the Nintendo Entertainment System was The Legend of Zelda. Also, what's awesome about The Legend of Zelda, it probably has two of the worst commercials I think I've ever seen for a video game. So let's take a look at both of these.
Did you see the latest Nintendo newsletter?
Whoa, nice graphics. I'd like to get my hands on that game.
You mean you haven't played it yet? We can play it on my Nintendo Entertainment System. It's The Legend of Zelda, and it's really rad. Those creatures from Ganon are pretty bad. Octoroks, Tektites, Levers, too. But with your help, our hero pulls through. Yeah, go Link. Yeah, get Zelda.
Awesome.
Intense.
The Nintendo Entertainment System. Your parents help you hook it up. The Legend of Zelda sold separate.
Think about, okay, let's for a second forget about the really bad rap that they're rapping to Zelda. You have an obvious cool kid, spiked head, denim jacket, looks like a tough guy, best friends with a very, very young Colonel Sanders looking guy.
That is Colonel Sanders' son. Yes.
Yeah, so that would be Private Sanders.
Private Sanders.
He has pretty much white hair, a bow tie, glasses, and a white shirt, and he's the obviously nerd geek in the friendship.
That's right.
And here you are combining the cool kid and the geek into one room, playing a game together, reading a magazine and playing a video game, and rapping. Wow, that's a lot to ingest.
It's fun. It's fun for everyone, right?
But I think it's funny because they're actually, I wonder if they're trying to close the gap between, the cool kid and the nerd. That was more, I believe, back in the 80s, that was more of a defined line to cross, so to speak, within the schoolyard. You were one or the other. Now, as we all know, the geeks have inherited the earth.
Yes. Yes, we have.
And everyone's, I'm really a nerd. I'm really a geek. It's like, okay, you're driving a motorcycle, but yeah, you're a geek. Okay, sure.
I agree with you. I feel like they were doing a little like breaking down the walls of the stereotypes, but then that kind of makes you wonder about the rap.
Yeah. I mean, look, we got, we had the Beastie Boys, we had Eminem, but Private Sanders and his bully friend. Maybe the bully was actually just trying to steal his Nintendo. I don't know.
Could be.
But
he definitely wasn't trying to steal the magazine.
Looking at the background too, it looks like he's got a Commodore 64 in the background, and at the 2-second mark, there's a big old computer monitor in the background. So that's interesting.
Well, this is definitely a hip house.
Yes, definitely hip. A lot of white walls, and he is Private Sanders. I'm going to say it's his house. Not the cool kid's house.
I agree with you there. It's definitely his house. It's hip but not rad.
It's definitely hip but not rad. All right, so let's do the second one.
Let's look at the second one.
Watch Zelda become a legend on your Nintendo Entertainment System.
Zelda! After rocks!
Which way to go?
Good times! Peahens!
Levers!
Zelda!
The Legend of Zelda. A never-ending adventure new for your Nintendo Entertainment System.
Zelda!
So basically, The Legend of Zelda will put you in an insane asylum.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. When I watched it, I remember watching this commercial as a kid, and, I loved the Zelda game at that point anyway, so it didn't matter. But what I found interesting about the commercial, it made me think of the guy from Police Academy, and I wanted him to do the commercial. The one who does all the voices?
Oh, yeah. He had to have done some sort of commercial.
He should. This was perfect for him, because this guy's making all these weird sounds and just be levers. You'll never look at a lever again, if you even knew they were called levers.
So, according to Wikipedia, the same guy who was in this video was the same guy who played the Crypt Keeper from Tales from the Crypt and Buster Bunny from Tiny Toons.
Wow. Okay. So he was a voiceover artist. Good voiceover artist.
Wow.
But he had no problem standing in front of a screen acting all crazy.
He's definitely, yeah. I mean, you think this guy's got to be, he's probably in his 20s in this commercial, so he's probably got to be.
He's in his 50s 40, now. 50s, yeah.
50s, yeah, probably in his 50s. You think he pops in when his family members come over. Hey, remember when I did this? Levers.
Yeah, and they're probably like, they're like, you know what? Yeah, that's great, Grandpa. We know.
Yeah, or he's just in an asylum right now. So
it could be that. Well, something like that would drive you crazy. So.
Yeah, well, that's my claim to fame. But I guess he was Buster Bunny, so. Wow, that's
all as well. Well, he was also the Crypt Keeper, and I love the Crypt Keeper.
I don't know where they're going with this commercial, though. I mean, it's just like, okay, I get they're promoting the game, but as far as Zelda being one of the most iconic role-playing games, in gaming history, I don't get this commercial. I don't understand why it's like they have this basically a guy in a black shirt, black pants, dancing shoes, nice moccasins,
very important,
white socks with crazy hair, just basically either having a really bad acid trip, and because that's what it looks like, or some sort of really bad reaction to some sort of medication, and he's freaking out in a room that he apparently can't get out of with no lights.
No,
it's scary.
Well, yeah. I mean, I bet they just threw him in a room and they'd be like, "All right, guys, just do what you want." And this is what we got.
Honestly think they probably drugged this guy, put a camera on him, put Zelda on in the background, and just let him freak out. Because honestly, and said, "Okay, roll it. We got 30 seconds of footage here." This is a strange.
It's definitely strange and disturbing, especially like to your point, for one of the most iconic games of all time. I go, this was their selling tool.
They could have gone so many other ways. They could have had an actor dressed like Link, or or even a larger animated version of the cartoon. Animation was big in the 80s, obviously. Just strange commercial for this game, but
instead,
nevertheless,
we wound up with two kids rapping. Or one kid rapping to the other kid, really badly. We got two kids rapping and a psycho and a ward.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. So these are just some of the commercials that we came across. Trust me, there are a ton of other commercials that you can look at, obviously on YouTube, because everything gets posted on YouTube these days. So sound off on our Facebook page. Let us know like some of your favorite commercials from the 70s and 80s. I'm pretty sure we'll plow into the 90s at some point, and we'll look at like other things like radio and print ads, because the print ads, I have to say, are pretty awesome. Just let us know what you think in terms of retro video game ads.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, I can't speak for Anthony and Larry, but I'm sure if you let them know a commercial that you want to have talked about, I'm sure they'll discuss it for a few. I'll take their time to discuss it. I don't remember any radio ads. But the print ads, obviously, I do remember, especially, rest in peace, Toys R Us, all the Toys R Us catalogs we used to get. But I do remember them in the local newspapers.
Yeah.
You'd have, like, some of them would have full-page ads, or you would just have the little boxes. But I don't remember the radio.
Toys R Us, Macy's, Sears. You remember the Sears catalog was loaded with stuff because...
Yes.
Yeah, you used to always get that.
Gigantic.
Yep.
So...
But so we'll get to that another time. But yeah, like Frank said, if you have a favorite, just let us know, and we'll happily talk about it or make fun of it. More likely, make fun of it. All right, Frank. It's time for this week's wacky retro game.
Wacky.
Yeah, we do need an intro for it. So if you want to sing one, go right ahead.
It's the wacky retro game. The wacky retro game of the week.
Thank you. I'll put a little 8-bit music behind that. It'll be perfect.
Okay.
So this week's wacky retro game is really interesting because I don't even know if I would call it a game, and you'll find out why. The name of the game is called Little Computer People. It was developed by Activision, released in 1985, and I'm sorry if I'm looking off screen, but I'm trying to read my notes. It was released on the ZX Spectrum, Commodore 64, Amstrad CPC, Atari SC, Amiga, Apple II. Basically all the computers back in the 80s.
I had this game.
You had this game. Okay, good. So you could...
I played this game.
I don't know about playing, so to speak, but basically...
Well, I watched this game.
You watched this game. Basically, this game had absolutely no winning conditions, whatsoever. It had one setting. It was a sideways view of a 3-story house. And then after a short period of time, we don't know how long, you would just sit there and watch the house. An animated character would just show up and occupy the house. It was always a male, except in the Japanese version. The Japanese version had a female. And then the person who showed up on screen would walk around the house. He would cook, watch TV, read the newspaper. Players could interact with the guy by just typing commands such as, like, oh, play a game of poker, or go cook, or something like that. So you would kind of tell them what to do. And that was really it. Each game, though, generated its own unique character, so no two copies of the game played the same. So if you had two copies of the game, you would actually get a different person, but they would just do the same things. It was ultimately just it wasn't a game.
You basically, you watch them. You can do a little interaction, but if you were interacting with them and then you stopped, it would look at the screen facing you, and it would knock on the screen. And you would hear a clink, 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 like, hey, I'm in here. Clink, clink,
hey,
clink.
Tell me what to do.
Exactly. I've watched this game many times for hours. We had this on Commodore 64. It was, honestly, to me, the precursor to Sims.
Well, and funny that you say that, because the person who created The Sims actually talked about this game as an inspiration for The Sims. So,
well, I love The Sims, so I can go up on hours on The Sims.
There you go.
Wow, I didn't think anyone knew about this game.
No, well, see, it's one of the things I do when I look for wacky games. And a couple of other things about this game. The character's name was randomly selected from a list of 256 names, so you can get a different name. And the documentation that accompanied the game, so the instruction booklet or whatever it was, it actually kept up the pretense or the idea that there were little people that lived in your computer. Yeah. So they actually tried to sell you on the idea. The software just brought them out from wherever they were hiding inside your computer, so you can see them living. Yeah. So little computer people, that is this week's wacky retro game.
It's so wacky.
All right, Frank. I have cooked up a very special retro spotlight for this week.
Okay.
Specifically because once I knew that you were going to be on the show with me as guest host, I dug deep into my brain to try and find what would be a really great game to cover that you're going to enjoy. What do you think I'm going to do?
This could go many ways, so I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you this much. It's not Baldur's Gate, so don't worry about that. No need to sweat on that. But, no, I actually wanted to pull out, because there was one game that you used to tell me all the time that you loved to play, and you actually referred to it in our previous segment. So it's actually apropos that I managed to find information on this game. But this week's Retro Spotlight is on Space Taxi for the Commodore 64.
I love this game.
So now you're gonna learn everything there is to know about Space Taxi that you may or may not know.
Yes.
All right. So, Space Taxi was developed by a company called Muse Software. It was released only on the Commodore 64 in 1984. That's when it first came out. I was
10 years old.
You were 10 years old. I was 6.
Okay.
So, and I didn't have a Commodore at the time. So Space Taxi is an action game. It was written by a man named John Kutcher, who actually built the game while he was a freshman at Hopkins University. That's where he designed the game. And it was later published by Muse Software. It basically simulates a flying taxi controlled by thrusters. And Frank, I'm sure you can describe the actual concept of the game.
Yeah, well, so basically the boards got progressively harder. The first board was basically, there was pads where you had to land on the pad with your taxi and make sure that your landing pad was down on your taxi. There were no wheels.
Mm-hmm.
The wheels with little just graphics. And you had to land, pick up the little person who would basically disintegrate, or he'd walk into your car and disintegrate, and then you would have to take him either to another pad,
mm-hmm.
or he would say the words "up, please." And "up, please," there was a little bar on top where you would basically shoot to the next level. So as the levels got progressively harder, you had to go from pad 1 to pad 2, pad 2 to pad 3, pad 5 to pad 4, until one of the characters said "up, please," and there was 3 different voices. And we thought it was funny because one of them had a really gravelly voice, and he sounded like my stepfather. So my brother and I would always go, instead of "hey," my stepfather's name is Jack. We called him Jackie. And instead of "hey, because the guy would go, "Hey, taxi, pad 4, please." So we'd go, "Hey, Jackie, pad 4, please." We would imitate my stepfather.
Nice.
Lots of laughs for us. But the game, like I said, got progressively harder, and you had kind of instead of a time limit, it was a fare. If you didn't get from pad to pad, your fare would slowly decline, and if your fare reached 0, you would just die. And I believe you got like 3 lives, and if you landed too hard, you lost a tip. So if you had a nice soft landing with your thrusters, it was really, you really had to work at it. I'm sure now any 8-year-old kid who's playing Fortnite right now would destroy this game in about 10 minutes. But I love this game. I played this game constantly. And there was one board, it looked like one of the pads was a beach chair, another pad was the umbrella, and then another pad was like the cloud. So they got it's basically what you did with Commodore 64 graphics. And there was just all these different little things. Some of them had moving pads. You had to go back and forth and land on the pad moving, and it got difficult. I think I made it to level 8, 9, or 10, but afterwards it was like, all right, enough. Because you can't save the game either.
No, you got to go through it all in one shot.
Great game, absolutely great. I played this game for hours. I wish they would have updated it. I don't know if they might have. I don't know if they ever did an update on it, but that would be fantastic.
Let's see what happens as I continue going through my spotlight, and we'll see.
All right.
One thing that I wanted to point out about the fare that you said is that there was also an issue where if you landed on the pad and hit the person,
yes,
if you landed and hit the person, he would say, "Hey." Disappear, and then you would actually lose money from the pool of money that you had. So basically, they basically like instantaneously sued you and won the case.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's basically what happened there.
So there was probably no court systems in the future. So
yeah, that's what it is. No courts. It's like the minute somebody says you did something wrong, you gave him money, and that was it. So you said you got to like level 8, 9, or 10. There were actually 24 levels in this game that you needed to complete.
God, yeah, I never made it to level 24.
Yeah, and to beat the game, obviously, you have to complete all 24. Oh. Like you said, each level featured a different setting or a theme. There was one level that was like a Candyland kind of theme. There was another one that was like a winter theme. And basically, those would complicate things further.
There was one that particularly drove me nuts. It was like a Jack and the Beanstalk. And the pads would disappear. They would grow, basically the branches grow in. So you could be landing on a pad and it would just disappear and you crash into the tree. And that's it. If you touched anything, your car would just disintegrate. Okay. So that was the game. It was such a great game, but it was a really pain in the ass game too.
Yeah, I'm really happy that I never really focused on playing this game. I played a little bit of it, but not that much.
I hate to interrupt you, but I'm looking at I just looked up the Wikipedia, and one of those was Turbocharged Taxi. That was level 13. That was the one I made it to because you would hit the button and it would shoot. You had no control over it, so I never made it past level 13.
So I'm sure you crashed a lot then at that point.
A lot of crashing, a lot of cursing, a lot of throwing.
Very angry.
It really wasn't. But yeah, a lot of cursing.
Okay. All right, so the taxi had a limited fuel supply. That was another issue that you had to deal with because not only was the money an issue, but the fuel was an issue. The fuel would reset at the end of every level, but sometimes you would have to refuel, and there was a special platform to go and refuel.
Yes. Oh, wow.
And then not only would you pay, but the longer it took you to take care of your fare, the less money you made. So if you had to stop and gas up with the fare,
and you could lose a fare if it was waiting. It would disappear.
They get tired of waiting. So it's basically New York. So
LA's much better.
With taxis? No, everybody drives here.
Yeah.
So or Uber or Lyft. That's all we got. So after completing all the levels, the player gets to go to a special mystery level, in which the player is greeted with a message that says, "Welcome to Muse World," with 3 platforms, each with a figure relating to another Muse software game. So they actually inserted other games they developed as a selling tool.
That's pretty cool. I never got that far.
So they had an ambulance that represented Rescue Squad, which was another game. There was a soldier for Castle Wolfenstein, which came out in 1981. And then there was a robot relating to another game called Robot War. The game supported up to 4 players. I don't know if you knew that. So and back then that's kind of cool, like getting 4 players for a game. And you said this earlier, the game actually had sampled speech, which is something that wasn't very common back then. So you had people say, "Hey taxi, pad 1 please, pad 2 please, thank you, up please." So different stuff like that. John Kutcher, who I said programmed the game when he was a freshman at Hopkins University. He also programmed 2 other games. One was Rescue Squad in 1983, which was on the extra level here, and then another game called Solo Flight 2nd Edition in 1985. So he's got 3 games to his name.
Was that Solo Flight one of the flight simulators?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, I played those. I had those too.
So you were all up in the Kutcher program games.
I was big with Commodore 64 games. Those Solo Flight games were, I mean, now it literally you have to wait for like the tower to clear you to take off on some of these, and you could do literally 5-hour flights from New York to California. This was just you'd go up into the sky and you'd see blue for a half an hour, and then I would end up just crashing because I got bored.
Yeah, because and those eventually gave way to like the flight simulators that came out, later on, which were way more involved and crazy. A few other things to say about the game. The game was cloned actually several times for the Amiga, once keeping the original name, once being renamed as Air Taxi.
Okay.
Don't know why. A similar game on the PC was called Ugh, where the player controls a caveman with a flying contraption.
Oh boy.
So, I don't know. And then on the Windows Phone, there was a remake of the first 8 levels in 2012, which was called Sketch Taxi. So,
okay.
I have no idea. Something else you may not know. In 2004, there was an authorized sequel, Space Taxi 2.
It was I did not know.
Yep, it was released by Twilight Games. It's no longer available to play.
This game wasn't that great.
No, it wasn't that great, but I know you loved it. Now, if you want to play Space Taxi today, you don't have to go out and find yourself a Commodore 64 and the game, because the Space Taxi game can be played for free at the Internet Archive. So it's actually archived online and available to play at will.
That's
so
great.
If you want to,
I might have to get on that.
You may need to get on that. And then to close out on Space Taxi, I actually found a copy of Computer Games Magazine, Volume 3, from 1984, which has a review for Space Taxi.
I'd love to hear this review.
Okay, ready? Some games give you free rein to recklessly roam the screen, bouncing off the walls if you like. Others demand slow, intense precision to stick to a safe path. Space Taxi is the latter. You've got to maneuver your taxi with short horizontal and vertical thrusts to pick up passengers and deliver them to landing pads across the playfield. You have no enemies and you don't shoot anything, but magnets, shooting stars, narrow passages, and black holes make the driving very difficult. Your score is registered by the money you earn in fares and tips. If that were all, Space Taxi would still be an excellent game. But it's also a breakthrough game. The first Commodore 64 game with clearly intelligible voice synthesis right on the disc. Passengers shout, "Hey taxi, pad 5 please," and other phrases when you pick them up or drop them off. While the voices are not necessary, the words are also written on the screen, they add a nice touch. There are a few other sounds in the game. The graphics are better than average. This is not a game for the hyperactive. You've got to be extremely cool, exacting, and patient. There are 24 completely different screens to get through. The first is ridiculously easy, but you'll be sweating by screen 6. Recommended for experts and beginners. Rating A.
Really? Wow,
Yep,
that's impressive. That's impressive. So basically, this is a groundbreaking game using the voices. I think it was called the short form was called SAM.
Yes.
Right. I believe they called Wow, that's pretty amazing.
They got a great review. They also shared a review page with a text-based game called Sorcerer. Do you remember Sorcerer?
It was all text. I just don't remember.
But anyway, and Gyrus, which was a very popular game.
I remember Gyrus. Yep.
But yeah, so I actually thought that was actually really cool. I found the entire magazine from 1984 when I was looking for Space Taxi stuff. So they had the whole magazine online in a PDF.
Don't sit on it. It's a great game, and especially I think if you played it on Internet Archive, I think you would enjoy it.
Yeah, so definitely check out the Internet Archive if you've never played Space Taxi. It's actually a really cool game, and that is this week's Retro Spotlight. All right, Frank, it's time for this week's Cheat of the Week. And since we were just talking about Space Taxi, I thought it would be kind of cool to give out a Space Taxi cheat, because even though this game is over 30 years old, there's an actual cheat for it. You got your pen ready?
I got my pen ready.
All right, very nice. So, this cheat allows you to have unlimited lives in Space Taxi. So if you want to go back now and beat the game, you have your opportunity right here. Okay?
I'm ready.
So what you need to do is load or reset the game, then execute the following basic command before running or restarting the program. Put in the code POKE, P-O-K-E, in capital letters, 16911, 200. Now, if you remember the Commodore 64, everything was loaded by command. So it was load, quote, star, quote, comma 8, comma 1, ran a game. Yeah, comma 8, comma 1. So I will never forget that. I think that'll be like the last words on my deathbed, and it'll be like Rosebud. Like, people are going to be like, what the hell? What does that mean?
We'll put that on your headstone. Don't worry.
Put it on my headstone. It's perfectly fine. Or if you want, do me a favor, put this on my headstone first, so I have unlimited lives.
Okay, got it.
So just put that in before you reload the game, and you can get unlimited lives for Space Taxi, and that is this week's Cheat of the Week. All right, Frank, man, we did it. We got through an episode together.
We did it. All right. I feel like the greatest, I'm like Joan Rivers here. I love it. Except I'm alive.
Well,
she was the guest on Carson all the time, guest host. So.
That's very true. No, and you know what? It's been, like I said, it's been a really long time since it's just been you and me. So this was actually pretty fun.
Yeah.
Definitely nice to have you, Larry. We're sorry you're not here, but we're not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry. Hashtag sorry, not.
Hashtag sorry, not sorry. Hashtag VB sucks. Very important. Yes. And speaking of, you can buy the T-shirts on teespring.com.
I think I'm going to be getting a shirt soon. So okay. I have my Retro Gamers mug over here.
Very nice. So yes, and you can also look on teespring.com. Is it teachip.com for our Retro Gamers merch. Yeah, there's also a Teespring, but that's different. For our Retro Gamers merch, for our hashtag VB sucks merch. Frank, tell everybody where they can find you.
Well, you could find us. I'm in the wrong thing right now, so I'm still looking at the thing. Well, obviously, you can find us. Our email is thebetterhalfpod@gmail.com. On Twitter, we're at betterhalfpod, the number 1. Instagram, thebetterhalfpod. You can find me on Twitter at mess411. And like I said, if you follow me, I will follow you back. Just shoot me a hashtag TBH for the better half. And Larry, my co-host and your co-host, everywhere on the internet at More365, MOHR365. We also like our Facebook page, and of course, obviously, we love those 5-star reviews on iTunes. So
yeah, 5-star reviews, very important. And like I said, I can vouch. I've been listening to the Better Half podcast. It's really good, really funny. You guys have great chemistry. So it's very easy listening, very enjoyable. So I highly recommend it.
Obviously, same goes with the Retro Gamers, because first of all, I mean, I know you guys got to be close to 20 years now.
Almost 20 years,
and
man.
We lived together. We also lived with the other Anthony, and Larry was just Larry lived with Anthony, and Larry lives by me now, so we're always together, and it's not even work, because we've lived it, and we're just telling. It's like we're out to dinner telling stories of how the New Year's Eve party when Larry kissed the doorknob in the bathroom 55 miles an hour, and
oh god, I remember that.
Across the face. And recently I just posted that picture that I found on Facebook of what I think was one of our New Year's Eve party, where you're sitting on the floor with Grace, and Chu is from the Yin and the Yang podcast is
singing karaoke.
and Larry's playing guitar. So I don't know how that happened, but
I don't know the guitar part, but I do specifically remember Anthony was singing Hootie and the Blowfish, "Let Her Cry." I remember that. He's a big Hootie and the Blowfish fan, and if I remember correctly, he actually had a decent voice, which was kind of cool.
I was drunk, so I probably don't remember. But I do remember the picture. So
I was stone cold sober, so I remember it very well. But and speaking of Anthony Chu, part of the More of the Same network as well, you can listen to his podcast every week called the Yin and the Yang podcast. Definitely one worth listening to. He talks a lot about MMA, so if you're into MMA, it's definitely worth listening to. Among other things that he talks about.
He gives some pretty good advice as well. I've been listening. I'm catching up as well. So I've listened to the first. I think I'm up to like episode 8 and 9, and he knows his stuff, especially when it comes to MMA and the whole training aspect of it. I'm not going to mess with him anytime soon. That's for sure.
No, definitely don't. Definitely don't. Although I have heard some friction between you guys on the shows, which is
He in the early episodes he tried to start a podcast war, but come on, I mean, he had no chance. So.
Yes, let's not start one now. No. And then for the Retro Gamers, you can always find us on the retrogamers.com, on Facebook, facebook.com/retrogamerspodcast, Instagram at Retro Gamers Podcast, and then you can hear us iTunes, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Amazon Alexa, Spotify, YouTube now. You can watch us if you don't want to listen to us. Your choice. And one more time, just to remind you guys, the NES Classic giveaway live tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern. Larry and I will be selecting the winner on Facebook. And I apparently forgot to turn the lights on in my house. As you can see, it's slowly getting darker here because the sun is setting.
I just realized that.
So as this podcast went along, it's like all of a sudden it's like, wow, Anthony's really got a nice shine to him. It's like, yeah, because it's the computer screen and nothing else.
And one last thing, we're going to have you on a future episode of The Better Half, either the next episode coming up or the one following that. Larry and I just have to work out our scheduling because I don't know what's going on with his whole... We're supposed to record Wednesday, but he's in the middle of his wrestling thing, so I don't know what's going on.
Beats me. But I do know that I'm looking forward to being on the podcast because not only will it be an opportunity for me to talk about something other than retro video games, not that I don't like to. I love talking about this stuff, obviously. But it'll be a nice chance for me to be R-rated.
Yes. I think I did pretty good. I don't think I cursed once today.
No,
so I'm
you didn't. No, you didn't. I was actually waiting so I can write down the time code to do the bleeps, but you were clean all the way through.
After about a year and a half of podcasting, I'm learning my my audiences and my being a guest on other people's podcasts. Larry and I just did one for Village Connection Network out here on Long Island. They have like 20 different podcasts that they do, and you have to you learn to. Not censor yourself, but you know your audiences. So I know this is more of a PG thing. So if you want some R-rated content, go tune into The Better Half.
Exactly. And if you want the video game content, you already are listening to it at the Retro Gamers Podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching, and we'll catch you next time.
See you later.